what Yemen did yesterday, which was uh, somehow surprise to many people, because after 12 years of the siege on Yemen and a lot of pressure, finally they're coming out and putting pressure on Saudi Arabia at this particular moment, which is so important. The strait is closed, and the only way that Saudi Arabia can export its oil is through the Red Sea and the ports they have on that side of their land. And what is that? Is that coordinated with acts of resistance? Is that something domestic, a domestic policy because they want to decide about their future as soon as possible? What is that?
I think it's a combination of a number of things. Obviously, the axis of resistance, they're always coordinating. It's not as if there's a boss and then there are proxies. That's, we've always, uh, we've always been discussing this, regularly, we've been discussing this on your show, that one of the myths in the West is that Iran has proxies. Proxies mean like mercenaries. Mercenaries do not fight like Hezbollah. Mercenaries do not make sacrifices like Hezbollah, like Ansarullah for the people of Palestine. Mercenaries don't do that. These are people who have principles, who have honor, who have dignity, and who have beliefs. But there is coordination. And I think a number of things happen. First of all, the situation in Yemen is becoming increasingly difficult because of the siege, and people are suffering. Uh, the Iranians sent a passenger plane because Iran does not accept the siege. It's barbaric, inhumane. It's what the West did to Syria. It's what they're doing to Cuba. It's basically uh, targeting people, and the West does that. They have no problem with targeting people. We see it in Gaza. So the Iranians don't recognize the siege, and they sent a passenger plane to bring in a number of ill people, injured people, but also delegation from Yemen for the funeral. And it so happened that I met people in the delegation, uh, and I spent a couple of hours um, at their place of stay. And then I went again for a second meeting. It was uh, uh, very excellent meeting, and very, very humble, very friendly and approachable people who are obviously of importance. But in my conversations with them, it was clear that they were moving in this direction. And this was before the plane was uh, uh, was returning to Sana'a, and then the Saudis bombed the airport. So even before this, they were moving in that direction. But when the Saudis bombed and some of the people I'd met were on that plane, so they put the Iranian passenger plane at risk. They put the passengers at risk. They put the crew, which is an ordinary crew. They're men and women who uh, work on on different flights. Um, they're not military or anything like that. And of course, it was an act of war against Yemen. So this contributed to that. This, as I was going to say, Beistallah, this was in Persian. This contributed to that and added fuel to the fire, and increased the incentive for the Yemenis to retaliate and to break the siege, because Iran had broken the siege already. The Saudis carried out an active war to stop this. It made Yemen further angry. So this pushed this whole project forward, and it gave it more momentum, and gave it greater popular support because the Saudis bombed the country. So that's one aspect to it, or two aspects sort of combined in one: uh, the siege itself, and then the attack on the airport. Another issue is the fact that Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz. So now that Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz, the Saudis only have the Red Sea, and it is the Saudis who are leading the siege on Yemen. So the Saudis are more vulnerable than they were before. Before they were exporting, I don't know, a million barrels of oil a day from the Red Sea. Now I've read different estimates, let's say 4.5 roughly million barrels a day are being exported from there, and they don't have exports from the Persian Gulf. So the Saudis are deeply, very much deeply dependent on the Red Sea. That gives Yemen more leverage. In the past, if they'd shut down the Red Sea with the Persian Gulf open, and a billion barrels a day going through the Red Sea, the leverage would have been very limited. But now the leverage is enormous. So Yemen has that incentive too. So you add these together, and also you have the United States completely focused on Iran. The United States has brought all its assets to the region, and it's focused on Iran. It's so far hasn't succeeded against Iran. We know that Iran has, and I've discussed this with you once before, I think, maybe before a program or after a program. Iran's missile capabilities uh, are sort of endless. They produce so many missiles and drones that they can go on for a very, very long time. So the Iranians are hitting the Americans hard. The Americans are completely focused on Iran. They can't wage war against Yemen again like they did last year, like they did at the beginning of Trump's presidency. So their hands are, the American hands are tied. Yemen has prepared itself. The Saudis are much more vulnerable. The Saudis have provoked Yemen, carried out an active war. These are these circumstances couldn't be better for Yemen. If you put all these together, it's the best time to do it. The Americans would only have limited resources to use against Yemen. The Saudis, everything they have goes through the Red Sea, and the Saudis have bombed Yemen and waged war against the country. So this is excellent for Yemen, the best time to put pressure on the Saudis to end the siege, the inhumane and barbaric siege, which is supported by the West. And this benefits Iran as well, because now that the Persian Gulf um, uh, is closed for business, uh, the the Red Sea, if it is closed alongside the Persian Gulf, that makes the oil crisis even greater. And of course, the Saudis also export some petrochemicals and other products from the Red Sea as well. The Saudis can still export from the Suez Canal if Ansar Allah does not strike them there. But large ships cannot go through um, the Suez Canal, and most of the Saudi markets, if not all of them, I don't know, most of them anyway, for sure, are Asian markets. Their oil is all Asian, almost all Asian market. So if the Saudis want to go through the Strait of the Suez Canal, they have to use small ships, and they'd have to go around Africa. But even then they'd have to return by going around Africa through the Suez Canal. So it's basically catastrophic for Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. I think, how do you find the way that Saudi Arabia may react? One of them would be doubling down, maybe attacking Yemen, which it doesn't seem that would work for them. The other one is somehow accepting, which would be a humiliation for Saudi Arabia. And the other one is talking to Yemen behind the scene, or making some sort of deal behind the scene, which it doesn't seem to me that Yemen would accept that, because they have to announce it. It's not just about Saudi Arabia. The United States, Saudi Arabia, and UAE all together put the siege on Yemen. And how do you see the reaction?
I First of all, it's very strange what to me the reason why the Saudis bombed the Yemeni international airports. And the airport is a civilian airport, and it was just an Iranian passenger plane. And the delegation came to Iran for the funeral. Saudi delegation participated as well. So for me, that itself was absolutely bizarre. Some say that the Americans put pressure on the Saudis. Again, very foolish. But I don't know. I don't think that the Saudis would bow down to Yemen that easily. I think it will probably come to. I think Yemen will probably start hitting tankers, and then the Saudis may bomb, and then Yemen may start bombing, firing missiles at Saudi oil installations. This could get pretty bad. Ultimately, I think Saudi Arabia will have to back down because they just to defeat Yemen. I mean, the Saudis and look, the entire region, Qatar, the Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, Turkey, Jordan, Egypt, everyone, and the entire West, they were supporting the genocidal war against Yemen. The UN Security Council, under Saudi pressure, passed a resolution against the government in Yemen. So they carried out a 7-year genocidal war. Of course, after a couple of years, Turkey and Qatar exited this sort of loose coalition because the Emirates and Saudi Arabia targeted Qatar and imposed a siege. But still, at the beginning, they were all helping to carry out this genocide and to strangle the Yemeni people. They bombed funerals. They bombed this massive funeral where hundreds of people were killed. They bombed school buses. There was an instance where they killed lots of kids, and they, and the West was helping them, providing them with weapons, and thousands of military advisors, especially British advisors, were helping the Saudis keep up. I mean, the British have been deeply involved in the genocide in Yemen and also the genocide in Gaza. The British military, it's uh, quite sinister. But ultimately, after 7 years, they failed. And after 7 years, when Yemen gradually began to develop its drone and missile program, they started targeting Saudi critical infrastructure. And that's what led to the ceasefire. So let's assume that the Saudis start bombing Yemen again. What is there to bomb? But if Yemen starts firing drones and missiles at the Saudis, at tankers, uh, at refineries, at petrochemical plants, at um, the pumping stations for the oil pipeline, at oil installations, then the damage to Saudi Arabia could be decisive, especially as the Persian Gulf is as it is. It could bring about instability in Saudi Arabia. So the Saudis they can bomb Yemen, but what is there to bomb? The Americans have already waged war against Yemen. The Saudis did it for 7 years and they failed. So all they can do is kill more kids and bomb more schools and school buses and bomb weddings and funerals, but they're not going to win. But then again, that's the same problem that the Americans have. They bomb schools, they bomb hospitals. They in the last few days they bombed the children's hospital in Ahvaz. They bombed bridges, but they can't win the war. So the same logic applies to Saudi Arabia as well. The Americans can't win the war, but they still continue the war. So logic, it seems, in the U.S. camp and the Western Empire and among its proxies is literally non-existent.
There are two sentiments about the war between Iran and Iran. One of them is that the United States, in the coming days, they're going to attack, they're going to escalate the attacks on Iranian soil. And the other one is the way that the United States is somehow pushing for some sort of pause, as it was mentioned in that tweet of the head of Iranian parliament. He said that on one side they're pushing for some sort of pause, on the other hand they're sending a lot of weapons to the region. This is the same side, as it was mentioned during the interview that Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi had 2 days ago. He said that they know what the United States is doing. At the same time, asking for some sort of ceasefire pause, they're preparing themselves for the next round of war. Is that the same sentiment right now in Iran?
Yes, there's no talk of any ceasefire. The Iranians are not going to accept a ceasefire. And the war will continue. Whether the United States escalates or not, it's going to continue unless the United States meets Iran's demands. And of course, the demands are the MOU, but they have to be implemented, not just accepted anymore. And the Iranian demands have increased. So the United States has put itself in a much more difficult situation than before. The Iranians are not going to give any concessions. There's not going to be some, I don't know, 5-day ceasefire, 10-day ceasefire, 20-day ceasefire, anything like that. And as you see, the Iranians are hitting the United States hard. Things are getting more difficult for the Americans because the Iranians are literally destroying U.S. capabilities in the Persian Gulf region. So the Americans have had to take their assets all the way back to Jordan. And now Iran is hitting Jordan with great precision. And that makes it very expensive for the Americans to continue waging war, because when they have to fly all the way from Jordan, and now they may have to take these assets from Jordan to somewhere even further away. That makes each the bombing campaign much more expensive. Not just fuel, but the planes need to be overhauled. It just makes it a lot more difficult, and of course, the Iranians are creating a lot of damage to the American fighting force. Every day, Iran has excellent intelligence, and it has lots of people on the ground who are collaborating with Iran in all of these countries. So, we don't know what will happen. I mean, I have no idea what Trump will do today, let alone tomorrow or next week. But the Iranians are prepared for all scenarios. If the Americans want to escalate, the Iranians will escalate. If the Americans want to target critical infrastructure, Iran can target much more critical infrastructure and much easier. It's much more easy for Iran because all of the critical infrastructure of the regimes in the Persian Gulf are right in front of Iran. They're alongside the Persian Gulf coast. I mean, sometimes people talk, about, I said this before. People talk about the Saudis and others they'll build more pipelines. It doesn't matter if they build pipelines. All of the oil installations, all the gas resources and the oil energy resources are here. They have to be taken from here elsewhere. So they're all in front of Iran. Their electrical power plants, they're very few in number and very big. But Iran has like smaller electrical power plants spread out across the country. And Iran builds its own goods. So Iran can repair. So it's going to be much more difficult for the Americans to destroy Iranian infrastructure. It'll be costly. It'll be, the ultimate crime. But the Iranians can devastate far more assets and far more easily, and that will bring down the entire global economy. Because if that happens, then the Strait of Hormuz is irrelevant, whether it's open or closed. Because if there's no gas, if there's no petrochemicals, if there's no oil, if there's no helium, if there's no fertilizers, then who needs the Strait of Hormuz? So it would be catastrophic for the world economy. And Iran will not hesitate at all in destroying these if the United States moves in the wrong direction. So no matter how this plays out, this is not going to end well for the United States. No matter how it plays out, it's going to end very bad. And even if the United States were to capitulate today and go back to the MOU, Iran is not going to open the Strait of Hormuz. It's not going to happen. They have to fulfill their obligations And there will be extra obligations. There will be Yemen. Yemen, the siege will have to be lifted. Then there's Gaza. Gaza will have to be dealt with. So the more the United States violates its commitments, the more demanding Iran becomes. And now that Yemen has joined, this is going to make the problem even more urgent for the United States. And the United States does not have the military power to deal with Iran and Yemen at the same time. And then there's the issue of Iraq, because the resistance in Iraq is huge. They are very large in number and very well funded and very well armed. They're a force much larger. They're a force significantly larger than Hezbollah and all of its reserves. So, they could easily take Kuwait tomorrow. And, Iraq, historically, they have claims over Kuwait. And, if push comes to shove and they want Kuwait, I don't think that the Iranians would object to that. And then, of course, the rest of these regimes in the region, they are, Saudi Arabia now sort of surrounded, uh, and the others are. The UAE cannot use Fujairah now. When you've seen how many ships Iran has struck during the past few days. So none of these countries are in good shape. The United States is not in good shape. There are no good scenarios. If the United States ends this now, a lot of damage will still be caused to the global economy. But I don't think it's going to end at any time. At least for now, it's not going to end, and it may escalate. And it's all bad for Trump, but he's not the decision maker. Tucker Carlson says he's just a slave.